Joe Lalley. Great conversation with Joe. One of my favorite topics, questions. He's got great stage presence. He runs workshops. What's the root of a great question? As always, depends who you ask. I mean, if you ask an attorney, I think they would say you never ask a question you don't know the answer to. But generally speaking, in leadership, business, just being curious. Sometimes ego gets in the way in some leaders and, they want to act or display that they know many things. But is a great leader one that says, I'm going to change my mind given new evidence? I wonder what you think about that. Question why. Joe has a point where you ask why 5 times. Can seem childish, but will it get to the root of the problem, of the issue? Great conversation. Love talking about this stuff. Joe's also a marathon runner. I open up that. Likes to play golf too, but just well-rounded, really inspirational and smart man. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for watching. Listen. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because I was working way too much. Before you know it, I found myself 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People think there's some secret. Ask me, how'd you lose that weight? Like there's some secret. There is no secret. How'd I lose the weight? Just one word, discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends, colleagues convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission? How do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Really good at it, Joe Lalley. Can you explain to me what it's like to be on mile 20 in a marathon?
Oh my goodness. Well, depends which marathon, but I've had a few where I just wanted to cry and crawl into hide behind a tree or something along the way. Mm-hmm. And then I've had a few where I've felt like a superhero where and I've it depends on how it's going, but the remaining 6 miles can feel like 100 miles or it can feel like 6 miles. So yeah, I've had both, and depends on the training, but also just depends on the day. I mean, sometimes you get a great day.
In this fast-paced MSP landscape, how do you stay ahead? Introducing MSPinfluencer.com, your ultimate hub for MSP news, insights, and community connection powered by Forza Dash. More than 75,000 MSPs subscribe to our MSP Influencer Pulse weekly newsletter, staying informed and ahead of industry trends. Tune in to emerging podcasts from Joey Pinz and leading MSP voices, offering essential tips, powerful insights, and success stories. Explore our multi-authored blogs, crafted specifically for MSP leaders, delivering fresh perspectives and actionable strategies. Celebrate excellence with the industry-leading Forza Dash MSP Influencer Awards, recognizing innovation, leadership, and impact in the MSP community. Join thousands of MSP professionals who trust MSPinfluencer.com to grow their business and expand their networks. MSPinfluencer.com, where today's MSP leaders connect, collaborate, and conquer, all powered by the Forza Dash platform, helping MSP vendors work effectively with MSPs and helping MSPs grow. Right. Yeah, like you said, the course too, right? Because depending on where you are, it could be that's a big challenge. I've done some triathlons, but just 26 miles running, Joe, is just, oh man.
That's a lot. The most recent one I did was in Philadelphia, and I loved it because the crowds, everybody's drunk and partying in the streets. Cool. It was great. Highly recommend.
Yeah, I could see them doing that. And you're still doing them now, Joe?
I am. So I'm trying to pick the one I'll do. I always do one in the fall. So I'm trying to pick which one. I think it may be the Marine Corps Marathon, which is in DC, but you go to Virginia and Maryland in late October. So I think that's the one, but still deciding between a few.
And why do you like doing them?
Weirdly enough, I really enjoy the training. And I think anybody who says I'm thinking about running a marathon, I ask them, well, do you enjoy running? Because you're going to do a lot of it. So I really enjoy it, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, I figure things out. I mean, if there's a problem I'm struggling with, I can't wait. When I get home, I can't wait to find a place to type it or write it down.
Wow.
And I also just feel really good afterwards. I feel like sharp. I went this morning early and I feel like my brain is functioning well today. So yeah.
It is something. Like sometimes I go off and no comparison, of course, but I just play golf by myself, and I don't have any earbuds in. I'm off the
Yeah.
grid, and I get some of my best thinking done then, Joe. It's
Oh,
incredible.
yeah. I've done the same with golf. I love those solo missions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something
Bag on
about
my
it.
back, let's just get this going. And, I just, yeah, it's liberating. And I know what you mean about training for something, because then you have a goal in mind. So you got to keep pushing. It's important to do
Yeah.
that. I could see why that's very
Yeah.
helpful, isn't it?
Gets you out of bed for sure.
And no
When you
hip
don't want to get out of
issues.
bed.
Yeah, that's true. No hip, knee issues or.
So luckily no knee or hip issues, but I had an Achilles issue
Mm,
that took me out for a year. I mean, it really took a year to heal. I had pushed myself a little too hard in 2023. Um, I did a bunch of halves. I was setting a PR every race because I
wow.
was training so hard. And
Personal
then I did,
record.
yep, personal record. Then I did the New York Marathon in November in 23, set a personal record again, and then did another half after that. And the next day I couldn't walk, and it
Jeez.
took me a year to fix this. It wasn't a tear; it was Achilles tendinosis, which according to physical therapists is almost worse than a tear because it just
Whoa.
doesn't heal. So that was rough. Took me a while to fix it, but now I feel fine. It just was unfortunate and frustrating for a while.
Hmm.
Have you had
What?
any injuries with the triathlons?
Here's the thing. I ended up loving the swim because I got a
Yeah,
coach and I learned how to swim. When you learn how to swim properly, it's wonderful. I can't go fast, but I can
yeah.
pretty much go forever. It's wonderful. I tolerated the bike because, I've got, it's a bike and you could push and pull.
Yeah.
And then I ended up hating the run. I played soccer my whole life with a lot of
Oh,
bad coaches, and they would punish us by running. It's a terrible mindset, right? Uh,
yep.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Should never punish with running. Then that means so then every time I ran, I felt like it was punishment, So
Yep.
but then, it's just, I think I'm a little bit older. I'm 57 and I got a couple of knee issues and yeah, it's just
Mhm.
hard to run.
Yeah. 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 I don't know. I'll do it as long as I can. I'm
Right.
sure at some point, my body will say no, but
It'll tell you.
uh, I'll push
Yeah.
it until it does.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you move to something else, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, just let a little
Yeah.
less impact. There's plenty of options.
Exactly.
My goodness.
Swimming, cycling, maybe that's in
Yes.
the future. I love swimming.
Paddling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Swimming. I mean, yeah, there's so many. Joe, why do some of the best leaders don't have the best answers, but have the best questions?
I think vulnerability. I think when leaders don't lead with answers, then new ideas can come out of everyone. So,
Hmm.
I think a leader who sort of projects this all-knowing, superhero persona kind of shuts down people in the organization, and um, they'll take a little bit of a backseat and say, well, they'll figure it out. My job isn't that. Or one of the phrases I can't stand is, well, that's above my pay grade.
Uh,
I hate that phrase. And I think it's a reflection. I think it's a reflection a little bit of the person who says it, but I think it's a
mm,
big reflection of the culture,
mm,
um, because there's this assumption that, well, I can't make decisions. I'm not at that level. So I think a leader who leads with questions takes a lot of that away and makes it okay to not know, and shows that it's okay to not know and be curious.
hmm. And describe what powerful questions leaders should be asking.
I think it's the open-ended ones.
Mm,
A, a very unproductive and maybe feels powerful to the asker, but an unproductive question is maybe something that the leader already knows the answer to.
mm,
So it's more of a test. Those I think are not very productive. They just start, a little bit of, hey, let me bring attention to myself. Let me make you maybe, look like you're not at my level or pay grade.
hmm,
So the more open-ended ones, I think, are the much more powerful ones because they can lead to other questions. They can lead to a story, and figure out the why behind things. It's easy to get to the what. What did our customers do last month? Well, 20% of them did this, but why did they do that? And then you can dig in a little bit more.
Is I don't know a good answer?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know is a good answer, as long as it's followed up with ideas about how to find out. So I had a boss once. He was the CEO at an organization, and I was new at the job. I was new at this company, and my job was to think about the product roadmap for the organization. What were we going to focus on for the next year? And we got to product idea number 2, and he says to me, "Is this what our customers want?" And I had this moment where I had never actually considered whether they wanted it. It sounded like a great idea. Other people internally thought it was a great idea. So that's what I put down. And I had this decision to make where I could say, well, I don't know, and look pretty bad, or I could make something up. So I said, I don't know, and kind of braced for the impact. And he followed it up with, well, how might we find out? And that, all of a sudden, it went from what could have been me versus him to us versus the problem, or us versus whatever, the challenge. So I think I don't know is okay as long as it's followed up with ideas of how to find out, or even more questions about how to find out.
I used to have this expression, in my business where an engineer would come into my office with a problem. And so I would say, so Brian Williams was popular anchor back then. And I would say, just don't Brian Williams me. Just don't give me the news. If you got a problem, tell me what the problem is and give me at least 2 or 3 solutions. And I can give you my experience on whether, one of those might be better than the other. So, so the idea is saying, I don't know, there shouldn't be an issue with that. How about I'm not sure? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, who can be sure?
Right.
It's hard to be sure. I talk about decisions a lot, and I think there's this perception that you have to be sure when you make a decision, and the decision is this big moment in time. And if you get it wrong, it's terrible. But I encourage people to shorten the time between decisions and treat the time after you make the decision as more important than the decision itself. So a decision is just something that helps you get from where you are to some new space. And if you're not paying attention to what happened afterwards, then you're not really putting yourself in a position to fix anything, pivot. So I think fewer and closer decisions that help you get more sure along the way, because it's really hard to be sure. I mean, things change.
The 2 big takeaways from the Jeff Bezos book, I'm sorry to pronounce Amazon, and one was never have a team that's what do you say? Never have a team that can be fed by more than 2 pizzas, I think is one. It's a small team. The other one was this whole thing on how much information is needed before someone can make a decision. So that if you have only 10% of the information, it's not enough, and you might rush. If you wait till you get 100%, it may be too late to go to market. So he had this magic number, and I believe it was 70%, if the manager or the decision maker can prove they had that much information and the decision fails, they would not be reprimanded. Have you ever heard of this?
I haven't, but I love it. And it makes a ton of sense. And I think that, that acknowledgement that, it's okay to be wrong.
Right.
Even if if you've got a certain amount of, some level of certainty, but it's okay to be wrong. I love that. I hadn't heard it before.
And you won't be hearing things like that's not, it's above my pay grade and these kinds of things when they enable their, people to make decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It puts them in puts them in control a little bit of, their own thinking, their own creativity.
Yeah. And the other big thing with Amazon is the way, or AWS is the way that they have their meetings where they don't, the first 45 minutes of the meetings where they actually read the document. There's no PowerPoint. You know about this.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody who worked there previously, and I was asking him about this process, and he said, at first it was tough
Right.
because these things are very detailed. Uh, they're pages, and yeah, that's what they do. They start the meeting, everybody silently reads, and there's an amount of time allocated to it. But he said, the more he did it, the more it helped him figure out what he thought about something and structure the way he would talk about that thing, which doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen maybe until the end of a project or when it's about to launch. So that I like that practice. The other thing I like about it is it puts some parameters around a meeting. I think meetings, a lot of people dread their meetings.
Yeah.
They look at their calendar and say, well, I'm in meetings all day long. And they're not excited about that because a lot of those meetings are very unstructured. You get in, you hope that you've got a group of smart people in the room. You're not really sure what you want to be true at the end of the meeting. You just kind of talk, and then meeting's over. But I like the structure of what the Amazon model is because there's a clear action that you take at the beginning. Time is allocated. You don't just launch into discussion, and people feel much more informed. I'm also so strongly anti pre-read. I work with clients who very often want to have a pre-read before a workshop or something like that, and I'm against it because I think maybe it happens, but I have never been in a situation where 100% of the people in the meeting did the pre-read.
Right.
So you end up covering a lot of it anyway in the meeting. So you're still not really saving time. And I also advocate for do something in the beginning of the meeting that helps people get really close to whatever that information would have been. So maybe it's a quick silent read and you note what stood out to you, and maybe you write those things down, organize them, and then share them. Maybe it's some other kind of activity, but do something with the information other than just absorbing it. So I'm anti pre-read.
Yeah, I have a small business, Joe, and I have some enterprise, big clients, and I have to sit in on these meetings, and it's just, a bunch of them just hearing themselves. It's so ridiculous. It's such a waste of time, but you could tell these are like professional meeting goers. This is what they do. Like go to meetings. I have a friend that works at a very big, I don't want to say their name, but a military, support contractor. And he says, Joe, I'm a professional meeting goer. I go to meetings.
I do meetings.
Yeah. So what do you do? I go to meetings. It can be really, really frustrating, especially when you're in a small business and there's no real room to kind of slide like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what the solution is there, but it's just a culture
fewer.
thing. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Why do I need to be in this? Yeah. I don't want to meet just to meet. Your book, Joe, Question to Learn. Tell me about what do you want the reader to come away with?
I want them to feel like they're not the only one. I spent a lot of the early part of my career being really curious, having questions, and I just happened to be in an environment where that wasn't welcome. So I kind of kept them to myself. Eventually, I became a higher level leader, and then I felt compelled to have the answers. So, what we were talking about earlier. So I thought asking questions was, a weakness, a sign of weakness as a leader. So I want people who felt either of those to feel like, okay, I understand how that was, and I also understand how to fix it. So that's the second part. Is I provide a lot of stories in the book, so it's not a typical business book with here's frameworks and all of that. I do have that, but all of it is told through stories. So I want people to feel like they see themselves in one of those stories, and that's been a lot of the feedback, which has been great. Is somebody will come to me and say, oh my goodness, that thing in chapter 9, that exact thing happened to me. So I want people to feel that at the end and feel like, here's some alternatives that maybe they hadn't thought of.
The Socratic method. Are you a fan?
Yeah.
Question-based learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you learn better through that. I think you learn through curiosity. And a little bit of kind of experimentation.
as I get older, Joe, I have more questions than I have answers. So is there such thing as a bad question?
Yes, there is. And people say this, there's no bad questions. I think there are. And I think it's less about the question itself. It's about the motive behind the question. So there's, leading questions where you're not looking to learn, you're looking to confirm, So typical example would be, the courtroom drama is,
lawyer.
The defendant had a gun in his trunk, correct? That's, that's not a question. But versions of that can happen, even with customers, hey, we've worked on this product for 3 months. We're really excited about it. Aren't you? That's not really a question, and they're not engaged. So I think that's a bad motive. We talked a little bit about this before, but I've named some of these questions. So I call it the time machine. So the example of this would be, let's say you're in a meeting with a team and you're trying to figure out maybe what the problem is that you're trying to solve, or maybe you're at a point where it's trying to think of solutions. And then somebody jumps in and they say, well, how will this scale? And at that point, you maybe don't even know what this is. You haven't really defined that. So jumping to how will this scale, it changes the focus and puts it in the wrong place for the team, where they're thinking about distribution and marketing and customer service, but they don't even know what that's for yet. So I think sometimes somebody's sort of trying to draw a little bit of attention to themselves. I'm a big visionary. So that, I think, is just a mistimed question. There's also, I call it the power move question, a little bit like we talked about before, but this can be something that someone asks in a public forum, knowing maybe the other person doesn't know the answer, so they're not in a great place to respond. It's sort of like a calling out of the person, and it creates a really bad culture because other people start to do that. So I think, I don't think the questions themselves are the problem. I think it's the motives behind the question that really matter.
Yeah, I think part of lawyer training is to never ask a question you don't know the answer to, right? But I think that's a very separate kind of thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're talking about in leadership, we're talking about in business, we're just talking about curiosity. Why ask the question why 5 times?
Yeah. I think you get to the root of the situation. I'll give you an example. So I had a job once. I was working, 14-hour days, 6 days a week. Something I don't recommend. Haven't done it since. It's not good for your health. But I was driving home from work and I ran out of gas, which I've never done before. It's a very weird feeling. When you run out of gas, everything just stops working and you're rolling. So I did that, pulled over the side of the road. I called my wife and I said, I ran out of gas. And she said, why? And I said, well, because the gas tank was empty. Why? Well, I forgot to fill it up this morning. Why? Well, I've been really busy. Why? Well, I feel totally overwhelmed and I'm not sure how I'm going to tackle all of this work that I have on my plate. So, the fourth why got to the root of the issue. It wasn't, that I just forgot. It was that my mind is being pulled in so many different directions that something like filling up my gas tank just, wasn't up there. And that's just such a normal thing. So digging through the obvious surface level answer through why helps you get to the root cause. It also can be really annoying. So if somebody gives you an answer and you just start hitting them with why, that can be tough depending on the relationship you have with that person. So I recommend alternatives to that. Oh, why did you do that? Which, tone matters. Why did you do that versus why did you do that? Totally different things. How did you make that decision? Oh, well, what happened next? Those kinds of things get you deeper into the story and feel a little bit less kind of accusatory than asking why 5 times.
What if discipline wasn't about punishment, but about unlocking your best self? I spent 2.5 years writing Discipline for Greatness because discipline changed my life. And I know it can change yours too. This isn't theory. Inside, you'll find real, practical steps you can use immediately to focus better, build stronger habits, reduce stress, accomplish your goals, and bring more balance to your life. Whether you're trying to get healthier, improve your career, or simply feel more control, this book gives you the framework. Start today. Grab your copy of Discipline for Greatness at joeypinz.com/book. Thank you. Yeah, because we've seen children do that and be annoying, right? And so, so we have to, Does ego get in the way of some of these things? I mean, the root of questions is being curious. If you're not curious, then you're really not going to ask questions, and it's going to be, I don't know, kind of, formality. So how do you instill curiosity? Because you got to kind of remove ego a little bit there.
Yeah. I mean, you have to model it. So leaders have a huge part in this. If a leader's not modeling curiosity and using it as, a company norm, you're just not going to see it amongst, the others in the organization. So I think if you model it, even in just personal relationships, at a party, just asking questions about somebody and what they do, what's it like? So not just, oh, what is your job? Oh, what's that like for you? What's a day like? How do you approach your work? Just kind of digging in. So, I think I think the biggest thing is just modeling it. I also think we can learn a ton from kids.
Right. Simple.
Kids, they haven't yet developed reasons to not ask questions or negative reasons to do it. So they're not self-conscious yet. They just want to go from not knowing to knowing. They would never, we get every parent or person has been in the car where the kid is asking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And they're not asking it to, prove that maybe they know it. They just want to see if someone else knows it. They're not asking it just to show that they've spoken up, which, can be a thing in, professional meetings. They just don't know. And even though it kind of feels a little annoying, that's pure curiosity. And we, in a lot of ways, we tend to lose it over time, which, if we can bring it back, learn from kids, I think that they're a great example.
Yeah, because generally ego's out of the way as well. And I heard you on stage, or maybe it was in an interview, say that you had one boss that would say, I could change my mind given new evidence.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's so important, right? Because there's humility involved there. They're humble. People say I have hundreds of hours on the podcast here, and aren't you afraid that somebody's gonna, take what you say and show a narrative? I say, I change my mind all the time. So how can they possibly do that? If I have new evidence, I have to be able to change my mind. You got to be open for that.
Yeah. That boss. So we would go to meetings and we'd work on different initiatives, and he tended to change his mind a lot. And, we'd been working on something for a week. We'd come into that meeting and then have to shift directions, and we'd be kind of grumbling to each other on the way out of the meeting. Like, oh my goodness, we can't seem to focus on one thing. And he sensed it in the next one. And he said, I reserve the right to change my mind when I have new information.
Right.
And just that, that statement kind of reframed our thinking around it. And it's okay. You don't know, you don't know what you're going to know the next day. So I think it's important to be open to it.
Given new evidence, only if some of our leaders today would have similar attitude, right? Instead of kind of digging in, and some of them you could just tell they know they're wrong, but they're just digging in because it'll seem like weakness, right? It'll seem like weak or indecisive, right? And so they have an ego or whatever their deal is. What's the difference between a leader and a manager?
I think, a manager, I think maybe is a little bit more focused on execution of work. I think a leader is probably more focused on overall principles and strategy for how work gets done. But I think either one can, play in both spaces. And I think it's important, kind of what we were talking about before, that a leader who is maybe, helping to project the norms and values of the organization, that they also are kind of helping with a little bit of execution, but also making it okay for a manager to contribute contribute new ideas to those norms and values. But I think that's a bit of a distinction, and you need both. Everybody can't be a visionary because maybe nothing gets done, and everybody can't be a manager because maybe you don't do anything new. So you need both roles.
They're both very important. But Joe, I've had people in my organization who are managers and thought they were leaders, and it can be a tough discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very tough. I mean, in order to lead, you have to lead people, and
Yeah.
not just manage them. It's a big difference. It's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah. Leaders are sort of, I don't know, that servant leader sort of idea. I think sometimes the role of a leader is maybe to provide air cover, just, hey, I'm going to give you the space to get this thing done, so that you don't have to, worry about questions or, any of that. So sometimes that's a role of a leader, is to just sort of have the back of the manager. So working a little bit the other way.
What can companies and leaders learn from stand-up comedians?
Oh, yeah. So this is one of my favorite things. So I did an offsite with my team a while ago, and we spent 3 days learning and practicing improv and learning and practicing stand-up comedy.
Wow.
And there's a difference between those two. So the improv we needed to do because we run workshops, this is what we did and I still do. And you have to think on your feet a lot. You have to kind of react to the moment, read the room. And you usually have co-facilitators you can rely on. So improv is similar where you're always kind of in support of your teammates. And that's really interesting. Stand-up comedy is very different. You are alone up there, and you really only have one metric. Do they laugh or do they not laugh? So I had to do 5 minutes on stage of stand-up comedy. It's
Wow.
terrifying. But what I love about it is there's nothing in between delivering the thing and seeing the reaction to the thing. So, there's in the corporate world, you may launch a product and then you might look at, usage reports or sentiment analysis or hear, sort of third party, accounts of what people think. But there's space between the delivery and the reaction. In comedy, there's none. You could tell a joke and the room can be silent, and you have your feedback. So I think the lesson there is, as much as possible, reduce the space between delivery and reaction. Don't spend weeks analyzing reports. Get in front of customers, see how they react. And I think the word react is more useful than the word feedback or input. When you say, "Oh, I'd like your feedback on this," sort of puts the person in a position of, "Oh, well, I better come up with something good, and I better find something wrong with this." Same with input, but reaction is just, I just want to know how you react. When you look at this, what do you think? What do you feel? So I try to go with that because that's, the audience isn't necessarily providing feedback in terms of, well, that joke, the tone you used was a little bit off. They're just reacting. They're laughing or not laughing. So I think it's a great, great way to think about work.
You've got great stage presence, Joe, and you do. And so when you're speaking on stage and even writing the book, how often do you think of the viewer or the reader or the listener? Do you have them in mind often?
Yeah, I mean, only. I think so. If I'm on stage, I get nervous, even though I've done lots of those things. I do get nervous, and a thing that calms my nerves, what they say, find a few people in the audience,
Right.
make eye contact, get some friendly faces, and I try to think about what it would be like for them to listen to me or watch me. Would I care about what I was saying? So whenever I'm preparing, I will, I'll practice. I'll try to share the concepts and the stories with somebody else and just get their reaction. And I want their honest reaction. I don't want them to tell me, "Hey, that sounds great." So I think it's so, so important when giving a talk, speaking, whatever it is. For the book, I just didn't want to talk at people. I didn't, and it's funny. So most of the chapters, really all of the chapters, leave the reader to kind of form their own conclusion about what they've just read, and sort of figure out on their own, well, what does this mean for me? And I got some feedback from an editor who was looking at some of what I wrote, and they told me that was a bad thing. They said, well, a lot of these chapters you're finishing and you're not really telling them what to do next. And I said, well, that's by design. I want them to understand the story and relate to it, but what they do with it is up to them. So, I stuck to that, even though I got some feedback not to, but that was really important to me in writing the book.
Yeah, the people who give kind of unsolicited advice to me have been slowly removed from my life. I was part of a peer group, and I eventually started facilitating. And I remember that they would not constantly, they would often ask me for advice. And I said, look, here's a situation that's similar to that. And here
Yeah.
that I learned from, here's what I learned. You should, people sometimes just want to be told, I don't understand that. Just here's the situation. Here's what I
Yeah.
learned. Maybe you can learn from that and take it from there. I just, the whole
Yeah.
advice, I think it's just too much.
Yeah. It puts the advice giver in just a weird
It
place,
does.
so
It does.
it's
Because
it's
and if they don't
non-specific.
follow it,
Yeah.
yeah, if they don't do it, then it's like, oh, I told you so. Or,
Yeah.
there's that whole friggin' thing too, right? Which is just selfish,
Yep.
right? Because you're hoping they fail, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a terrible place to be. If I were you, I would do this. I said, I didn't ask you what you would do. I just said, what's your opinion about the situation? Because
Yeah.
you don't know all the factors. That's a tough one right there, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
You have some strong opinions about AI and leadership.
Yeah.
What are they?
So we are at a really amazing time, I think.
Yeah.
I think there have been massive technological changes forever, from, you know, going from, hand weaving thread for clothing to having a power loom that kind of did that automatically to, websites being something you can deliver to somebody immediately versus print. There have been a lot of these things, but AI is different because the other things helped you outsource tasks. AI can help you in some ways outsource your thinking. You can, it can be a great thought partner, but it has to be a partner. It can't be the one kind of, driving a car. You still have to have the wheel. And I think a mistake or a risk that a lot of organizations are making right now is they're throwing money at AI, throwing tools at their people, but they're not thinking about, well, how would we use this or where would we use this? So they're going solution first. I think a better approach is start with problems, find out what's not working, and ask people, what do you hate doing? Where do you think we're broken? And then do some experiments to test, well, which AI model might be best for helping with this problem and testing this one or that one. Where are things that we actually should leverage the power of AI versus leveraging the power of humans? And making thoughtful decisions about that. I just have gone in with some other founders on a startup. This is, a week old,
Wow.
and we're totally focused on helping people with that challenge in helping people with just AI literacy. So understanding just sort of how it works when it doesn't work, kind of taking away the intimidation that sometimes people can feel. At the same time, meeting people where they are. So, not going in and saying, we're going to train you on this really advanced model, and by the end, you'll know how to do it. That might not be the right thing for somebody at the time. They might need understanding and a little bit of practice in order to get eventually to something like that. So, yeah, I'm excited about this new venture. The goal is to kind of close that gap around AI literacy and just make it accessible to more people.
Is there a question, Joe, leaders should be asking themselves often?
That's a good question. Um, I think, I think one, I'll use the question I got from that leader in that story. Is this what our customers want? I think that's a good one. Um, I think being open to, or actually requiring new information to continuously validate, is this what our customers want? Is this what our employees want? I know a lot of things are, hey, this is your job, go do it. But, are there things that can make them enjoy their work more, be more efficient? But I like, is this what our customers want? Because it puts you in learning mode.
Is there a question, Joe, you ask yourself every day?
Yeah. I mean, what am I going to do today? So I, I saw this somewhere. I think it was a Steve Jobs thing, but in terms of business and with the book as well, and other ventures, I know what generally that end goal is. But I just need to focus on what are the 3 things I can do today that will help me get to that end goal. I compare it a lot to running a marathon. So running a marathon requires lots and lots of training. So it might be 3 months before the marathon, and my end goal is run that race. But I just need to know what I'm doing that day. And maybe that day I'm doing a particular type of training run. So what am I going to do today? I think brings the focus into things that you can actually tackle at the moment and takes away focus from something that's maybe down the road and might not be necessary when you get there. So I think, yeah, I'll go with that. What am I going to do today?
Is there a question that you wish more people asked you?
Yeah. I would say, something, it would have to be something really open-ended. Um, what do you think about that is a little bit too open-ended? Um, you know, I'll go with what's your reaction to this? And I think it puts people in reaction mode. So you get that immediate, unfiltered one. Because sometimes people will come to me and say, I'm working on this project. I'm at this stage. What do you think I should do? I'd much rather have them say, I'm at this phase. Um, I've done such and such. So put something in front of me or tell me about something that is happening. And then what's your reaction to that? So it's easier to react to something that's really in front of you. This happens with surveys and customer feedback. People, I've seen this so many times where you can ask customers questions and they will have answers. So, how would you like to get across the road? Well, I'd like a moped. But then if you give them a moped to cross the road, they may not want it. They may actually say, well, I want something else. So what they say and what they do tend to be different things. So I think it's important to validate those two.
What's your initial reaction? What are your initial thoughts on this? And it's important to get those quick ones before they start thinking about it. It's very interesting. Of course, you can get some more later on, but that just really tells a story.
Yeah. Does the audience laugh?
Is there something, Joe, that you believed in firmly 10 years ago that you no longer believe now?
Yeah. I may go a little bit more recent, if that's all right.
Sure.
So back to AI, I've gone through this progression, and like I'm sure many others, started with a little bit of the doomsday scenario of this may take people's jobs. If people don't have jobs, they won't spend money. If they're not spending money, the economy will collapse and we'll all be controlled by robots. So, these thoughts crept into my mind. So it started with a little bit of, I'll call it concern. Then I started getting a little bit more curious. Okay, well, how could I, what problems do I have and how could I maybe address those problems with this? So a little bit more concern. And then I started to change my mind away from this kind of doomsday scenario around AI, where I started to practice, so I started to started to use it. And I think I have evolved all the way to being really excited about it. And it's not because I've learned tools. It's because I've started with problems and I've seen value in using some of these tools in sometimes not really complex ways. And I'm excited. I think new jobs will emerge. You know, I mean, I was a web developer once, writing code for websites. That is not a job title anymore. So I'm excited to see where it goes. And I also think people need to be kind of met where they are a little bit in order for them to also get excited. So I've changed my view on it maybe over the last 4 years.
So Joe, I started my firm back in the 90s. I'm in New Haven there. I know you're in New York, but
yeah, good pizza there.
Very good. I would argue the best. Yeah. My parents met in Queens, had me, and then took me out of there. But they couldn't afford it, immigrants. But I started the business, you mentioned working for 14, 16-hour days. You won't recommend it, right? It's just a terrible way to go. Start putting my exercise in the back seat, not paying attention to myself. And next thing I know, in front of the doctor, she tells me I'm at 340 pounds. So I had gained all this terrible amount of weight, didn't know I was that big, but knew I was getting big. But she says to me, if you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. And of course, my daughter was just born, scared the life out of me. Driving home, punching the steering wheel, this is my pie hole. I did this to myself. I can abuse myself all I want, Joe, but my decisions are much bigger than me now, right? I've got this family. Yeah. So next 6-7 months, lost about 120 pounds, kept it off. And you can't look at this as a finishing line, right? These are lifelong changes, right? And when I tell people this, they always say, well, first they say, did you use any drugs? And of course I say no. But secondly, they say, how did you do it? And I say, discipline, right? Routine, focus, willpower. How does discipline play a role in your life, Joe Lalley?
Yeah. So, I mean, amazing story, and, love to hear that sort of thing, because it does require a lot of focus and effort. So the thing that I think about all the time is, so there's a book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And a lot of what he talks about is connect new habits that you want to focus on with maybe existing habits. I like to run. We've talked about it. There are mornings where I don't want to, but I'll lay out my sneakers and my running things. Sometimes in the bathroom where I'm going to brush my teeth, because I know every morning I'm brushing my teeth. So it's connecting things with things you're probably already going to do to start to turn those things into habits. So it shows up a lot for me in that way. I will, put things next to things I know I will do. And that helps a lot because, it's the little incremental actions over time that make the difference. It's not this one big kind of sweeping movement.
And as a kid, was discipline talked about in the household? Was it exemplified?
My parents were they encouraged me a lot to explore and, kind of figure things out. I also think it's a little bit of a different generation. Summertime for me was wake up, have some Cheerios, go out and play until dinner time. And they didn't know where I was,
right?
But they encouraged that a lot. They kind of let me choose my own path. So I wouldn't say there was any kind of this rigorous discipline that maybe people think, but there was a norm that they instilled in me to, be okay trying things and being supportive where they could. But I don't know. I appreciated that. I think I'm sure has a lot to do with, how I think today and how I approach things. And, trying not to be afraid to try them, like running a marathon and writing a book.
Yeah. When those streetlights come on, you better get home, right? That's what we were told as kids. Yeah.
Mom will yell out the window.
That's right. Yeah. What motivates you, Joe?
Learning motivates me. I love trying to get better at things. That's a big one. So one of the big things I've loved about facilitating workshops, doing talks and things like that is just seeing people kind of all of a sudden think of something in a new way. You see that moment. It's, everybody says the light bulb moment. I love that stuff. It's why I do a lot of the work that I do. But learning also, I mean, I'm learning. So I'm trying to learn how to play golf. I'm
Huh.
terrible. I'm terrible. I never played it growing up. I barely played it as an adult. And, but I'm okay. It's kind of fun to be bad at something,
Yeah.
you know, um, and just, get a little bit better each time. I like the challenges and, you know, I, I want to, I'd like to think that I'll find something like that for the rest of my life, something that I'm
Mm.
bad at and then can slowly get good at.
So learning, being curious, these things seem to motivate you. Probably having impact as well. So how do you measure success given that motivation?
Yeah. So on the light bulb moment side, it's sometimes a little tough because it's hard to quantitatively measure those moments. There's not, like a pass fail on that sort of thing. I
Mm.
try to measure them through, staying in touch with people that I've, done workshops with or spoken with or who've read my book and just hear their stories, and that helps me know if that impact has taken place. So, I think a lot of it is that qualitative side of things. I think, learning for me, I mean, I I don't know. Somebody told me the better you get at golf, the less you enjoy it. I hope that's not true for me. Uh, because people, well, if you're getting better and you have a bad game, you're gonna, right now I don't feel too bad about having a bad round. Uh, but I don't know. I try to make sure I'm still having fun, not throwing
Yes,
my clubs in the water.
that's right. That's right. I would have a process where like a leadership type role, I would take them out golfing. You could learn a lot
Mm.
about a person in 18 holes. Are they a club thrower?
Yeah.
Even if they have a good hole, how do they react after that? It's
Yeah.
just, there's a lot of things you can't really hide after 18 holes.
Yeah.
I do try to talk people out of playing. It can keep you up at night. And I've been playing for
Yeah.
about 20 years, maybe a little bit longer. But the great thing about it is that this is a sport you could play into sunset, right? I mean, that is the
Yes.
nice thing. There's no impact or very little,
Yeah.
just only to your sanity. But
True.
but it's frustrating, but it's boy, when you have a really good hole and you make a really nice shot, there's nothing like it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it can fix it. That one shot can fix the
Yeah,
last
it
eight
does.
bad shots.
It does. Yeah,
Yeah,
it really, really does. Do you meditate or journal, Joe?
I meditate. Journaling, I guess you could say I do. I write a lot of articles. I have a newsletter, and I enjoy the
Mm.
process of writing it. My first step is always just sort of, free form, don't worry about punctuation, grammar, connective tissue between things. So I enjoy that. I guess that's sort of a form of journaling. Meditation, I have struggled with this. So
Mm.
I've tried, I think there are different types of meditation. So I've tried the maybe what most people think of and, sit down in a quiet place and try to clear your head. And if thoughts creep in, think of them as a cloud kind of passing by. And I know people who that works really well for it, but I've struggled so hard with it. So I've tried a couple of different things where instead of not focusing on anything, I'll kind of put myself in a place. So I'll think about, I was on a beach in Costa Rica a few years ago, and this was one of the
Nice.
most relaxing moments I remember. And I'll close my eyes and I'll see it. I'll see, well, this rock was out there in the ocean, and to my right was this, and the sand felt like this. And I try to put myself there, and that really helps me. And the other form to me are things like running.
Mm.
When I'm running, I feel like that is
Yeah.
meditation. Anything where you're a little bit in flow, it could be, that golf round by
Oh
yourself.
yeah.
It could be writing. It could be doing something at work that you love. I think those are kind of forms of meditation because you're in that flow moment.
Yeah, you're off the grid. You've got nothing. You're with yourself. I mean, it
Yeah.
certainly is some form of meditation. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Joe, it occurs to me, after talking to you for just some time, learning about you, I want to ask the art versus science question. It seems to
Hmm.
me that you're very analytical, you ask questions, but you still have, you like to run, you like to play golf. How often do you rely on your gut to make decisions?
All the time and a lot more than I used to.
Huh.
Uh, I so I will look at data and just available information, and that'll help me inform my decision. But you can never really be sure, and I have learned to trust trust the feeling I have a lot more over the years. And a big part of it is 5 years ago, I started my own business. I started my own company. And for the most part, I was a solo operation. I didn't really have full-time colleagues or employees. So there were tons of times where I just had to, I could bounce ideas off people, but ultimately decisions were my own. And I learned to trust my instincts. And most of the time, those were right. Um, and I think if you have some feeling, trust it. It's bubbling up for a reason. So, I do, I'll use the data to inform, but I oftentimes will use the gut feeling to decide.
Want to show your love for discipline, inspiration, and the Joey Pinz podcast? Now's your chance. Introducing the brand new Joey Pinz merch store, where style meets discipline. Choose from premium apparel, cozy hoodies, stylish hats, durable bags, and your new favorite coffee mug, all featuring the iconic Joey Pinz logo. Perfect for podcast fans, discipline enthusiasts, or as unique gifts for friends and family. Every purchase supports the Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations podcast, helping us continue to inspire greatness and promote positive change. Visit joeypins.com/store today and wear your discipline proudly. Joey Pinz merch. Wear it, share it, and live it. I give the analogy of, I'm 150 yards out, Joe, right? I got a nice lie. There's only about a 4 or 5 mile hour wind. The pin's in the middle. Everything is saying 8-iron. But you know what? It's 8-iron isn't getting there. I'm going with 7. So I get
Yeah.
all the data, right? Get all
Yeah.
the data and then ask the gut for kind of the last gate, answer. I mean, this is typically what I do on the course. So I say, well,
Yeah.
Joe, you're more art than science on the course. I said, well, I guess so, because I do ask my gut almost every time. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you grab that 8-iron in the back of your head, you're going to be thinking, oh
You're
man,
going to
did I,
overswing.
did I
Yes.
make the right
Yeah.
decision here?
Right.
Little doubt creeps in. Yeah.
Smooth out a 7, Joe. Just smooth it out. Don't overswing and see what,
Yeah.
you got to remove ego a lot. A lot of times when I play with some newer golfers, they're like, oh, my 9 can get there. And, there's a
Yeah.
lot of short balls. There's a lot of short balls to the green, don't
Yep.
get that out of your mind, man. There's no ego. And this is the most humbling sport you'll ever see,
Oh yeah.
because it's all up to you. You can't blame anybody else, but then again, you get to take all the credit when you do well.
True. True on both
Yeah,
ends.
yeah, it really is. It's wonderful. What's one thing that you changed your mind on in the last month, Joe?
Mm. Uh, so I think the AI thing
Yeah,
is
that's big, huh?
definitely a big one for
Yeah.
me. I think about it a lot. It's part of my work, and I have changed my mind on it from being, kind of concerned and a little bit afraid to super, super excited. Um, that's a big one. I have a son who's going to go to college next year, and
Mm.
we're waiting for acceptances. Uh, and I don't know if it's a change of mind, but more maybe a little bit of a change of behavior on my part. Um, I've tried to guide him a lot in the decision process and all of that, but I'm realizing he's going to be there on
Yeah.
his own for
Yeah.
4 years, ideally. Um, it's really got to be his decision. So I ask him questions about, how are you prioritizing this decision? I'll provide all the, support and information I can, but I'm not trying to guide that decision really. It's so in the last few months, that's been something. It's tough to think because that decision might mean he goes far away and we don't get to hang out so much, but he's got to do what's right for him.
My oldest daughter went to school in California. She didn't know anybody. And Joe driving away, dropping her off and driving her away was, it was quite a moment, man. It's like,
yeah.
Yeah,
I think I'll be a mess.
It was something. Absolute pleasure talking to you, Joe. I love what you do. I love learning about you. Great talk with you today. Anybody watching or listening, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's a great place. Connect with me there. I love talking about this stuff. I do respond to people there. The other thing is my newsletter. So that's probably the place to follow what I'm thinking. I send it from my own email address, so people can reply directly. You can find that joelalley.com/newsletter. But I think LinkedIn and that are probably the two best ways.
Joe Lalley, LALLEY.com. And of course, the same on LinkedIn. You've got also Instagram and YouTube. I thank you so much. Next time I'm in your New York area, Joe, maybe we'll get a cup of tea.
Yeah, maybe play around too. You can
let's look at that. Look at that.
You can give me some tips.
That's right. Yeah. Get a Target and get there. That's what I say. Yeah. Thanks again,
right.
Joe.
Yeah, thanks. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypinz.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.